Texas mom had been buying the same basmati from Costco for over a year. Her 4-year-old came back with elevated lead levels. The walls were fine, the water was fine, it was the rice. Some of the most popular basmati brands on American shelves right now are failing lab tests for heavy metals and pesticides. Here are 7 you should stop buying right now. The fake basmati that is poisoning you. Slowly. Coming in at number 7, we have Rice Select Texmati Basmati Rice. This US grown hybrid is sold at stores like Kroger, and right out of the gate, there is a problem. It is not real basmati. Not even close. See, there is something called a geographical indication tag, which is a certification that confirms actual basmati origin from the Indo-Gangetic plains of India and Pakistan. Real basmati carries that tag. Texmati does not. The grains are shorter, the aroma is weaker, and the moment you open the bag, you can already tell something is off. But here's where it gets scary. Arsenic levels tested at up to 317 parts per billion. To put that in context, Indian basmati typically sits around 55 to 65 parts per billion. That is roughly 5 times the arsenic content. And the reason US grown rice runs that high has nothing to do with modern farming. It goes back to the soil being loaded with old pesticides from cotton farming that happened decades ago. Those chemicals broke down into arsenic compounds and just sat in the ground, waiting. Rice pulls arsenic out of soil like a sponge because it grows in flooded paddies where the water dissolves everything lurking underneath. The EPA ties lifetime cancer risk to arsenic exposure at levels as low as 10 parts per billion in drinking water. So when your rice is hitting 317, you are not just eating dinner, you are slowly building up a toxic load in your body that compounds over months and years. If you are eating this stuff a few times a week, that math gets ugly fast. I genuinely cannot believe this is still on shelves. Skip this one entirely. The Whole Foods brand with a dirty secret. Number 6 on the countdown is Tilda Basmati rice. Tilda is a UK-based brand that you can find at stores like Whole Foods, and on paper it looks like a winner. It scored pretty well on adulteration at only 5.63% non-basmati grains mixed in. That is low compared to others on this list. It also got top marks for aroma in sensory testing. So you are probably thinking, what is the problem? 2 words, pesticide residues. Independent testing out of Switzerland found multiple pesticide residues that exceeded safe limits in some packs of Tilda rice. We are talking about fungicide traces that can disrupt your endocrine system. And if you are not sure what that is, it is the system that controls your hormones, your metabolism, and your reproductive health. Basically the control panel for how your body functions on a chemical level. Messing with it is like someone randomly flipping switches on the electrical panel of your house, except the house is your body and you cannot just call an electrician. On top of the pesticide issue, the overall texture was rated the least preferred in taste tests despite that good aroma. There are reports and even video reviews showing high broken grain counts in certain batches. Broken grains cook unevenly and turn your rice into a mushy clump instead of the fluffy separate grains basmati is known for. You know that feeling when you cook rice and it comes out looking like the wallpaper paste? That is what broken grains do to your pot. Arsenic levels are average for Indian and Pakistani origin rice, so that part is not the main concern here. But when you factor in the pesticide findings from Swiss testing and the inconsistent quality from batch to batch, there are simply better options out there. You are paying Whole Foods prices for something that might come with chemical residues you did not ask for. That is like paying extra for organic apples and finding out they were sprayed anyway. Your wallet and your endocrine system both deserve better. The Costco bulk buy hiding lead. Now at number 5, Dawat Basmati rice. This brand comes from LT Foods and is popular at Costco, so a lot of families are buying this in bulk. We are talking those big bags that sit in the pantry for weeks. On the surface, it looks solid with good aroma and decent name recognition, but the lab numbers tell a completely different story. Testing found 7.89% non-basmati adulteration, which is not the worst on this list, but it still means almost 1 in every 12 grains you are eating is not what you think it is. Now that geographical indication tag I mentioned earlier with the Basmati, that certification has been in place since 2008 specifically to protect authenticity and confirm the rice actually comes from the right region. Brands that pass the GI standard give you the real thing. Brands cutting in cheaper grains are basically running a bait and switch on your dinner plate. But the real alarm here is not the fake grains. It is lead. Dawat tested at 0.6 parts per million for lead, and the safety limit is 0.2 parts per million. That is 3 times over the limit. Let that sink in for a second. 3 times over what regulators say is safe, and this is sitting in bulk bins at one of the most trusted retailers in America. Lead is a neurotoxin, full stop. It is especially dangerous for children, where even low-level chronic exposure is connected to cognitive deficits, lower IQ scores, and behavior problems that can last a lifetime. We are talking about permanent developmental damage from something that looks completely harmless sitting in a bag on the shelf. For adults, ongoing lead exposure links to high blood pressure and kidney damage. And here's the part that really gets me: lead does not flush out of your system easily. It builds up in your bones and stays there for years. Your body literally stores it like a savings account you never wanted. US buyers have also flagged that quality varies a lot depending on which bag you grab, so you never quite know what you are getting from one purchase to the next. Despite the nice aroma and the Costco convenience, the safety numbers on this one are bad enough to walk away from without thinking twice. I do not care how good the deal looks on that shelf tag. The Walmart bargain. That is not worth the gamble. Number 4 on the countdown is Airplane Basmati rice. This is a budget Indian brand that you will find at Walmart and Amazon, usually priced around $10 to $15 for a 10-pound bag. That price is tempting for sure, especially if you have got a family to feed and a grocery budget that is already stretched thin. But the adulteration rate sits at 17.35%. That means nearly 1 in 5 grains is not Basmati at all. When you mix in cheaper rice varieties, you lose that long grain separation and nutty flavor that makes Basmati worth buying in the first place. What you end up with is shorter, stickier grains that cook completely differently and taste flat compared to what you expected. It is like ordering a filet mignon and getting a microwave burger patty on a fancy plate. Sure, it is technically beef, but come on. Reviews mention off smells in some bags, which could point to poor aging or bad storage conditions before the rice even reached US shelves. Proper Basmati is aged for 12 to 24 months after harvest to develop its signature aroma and that perfect dry texture that lets each grain separate when cooked. When that aging process gets cut short, or the storage conditions are wrong, you end up with rice that smells like a damp closet instead of a kitchen. And here is something most people never think about. When you have got that much non-Basmati rice mixed in, you have absolutely no idea what pesticides those filler grains were exposed to during farming. Those cheaper varieties do not go through the same testing or quality checks. They come from completely different farms, different regions, different growing conditions, and they get blended in quietly so nobody asks questions. Cumulative exposure from unknown grain sources is a real risk that people overlook because, hey, it is just rice, right? At that price point, it feels like a bargain, but you are basically gambling on what ends up in your pot. And those are not odds I would take with something my family eats multiple times a week. The premium label that is anything but premium. We are in the top 3 now, and I need you to pay extra attention because these get significantly worse. Everything up to this point was bad. What is coming next is the kind of stuff that should make you go check your pantry right now. Number 3 is Heritage Basmati rice. This brand markets itself as premium Indian Basmati and shows up at Target and ethnic grocery stores across the country. The word premium is doing a lot of heavy lifting on that packaging because the product inside does not match. And the gap between what the label promises and what you actually get is one of the biggest on this entire list. The adulteration level was 9.53% non-Basmati, which is moderate and not as bad as some others we have covered. But the broken grain percentage came in at 36.8%, which is extremely high. Let me say that again. More than a third of the rice in the bag is cracked and chipped. That wrecks the texture of anything you try to cook with it. Your biryani turns to mush, your pilaf clumps together, and you lose the entire point of using basmati in the first place. You might as well cook minute rice at that point because the result is basically the same. In sensory testing, Heritage scored the lowest across the board. Tasters pointed out bland flavor and a missing aroma, which is the exact opposite of what the premium label on the front of the bag is promising you. It is like buying a sports car and finding out the engine came from a lawnmower. On top of all that, there are consumer complaints about insect infestations found inside sealed bags. Sealed bags. That means the bugs were in there before it ever left the warehouse, which points straight to storage and quality control failures somewhere in the supply chain. I do not know about you, but I did not sign up for extra protein in my rice. Arsenic levels are average for Indian origin rice, so it is not the worst for heavy metals by itself. But when you stack up the broken grains, the weak flavor, the bug reports, and that misleading premium branding, this one does not earn a spot in your kitchen. You can absolutely do better for the same price or less. The rice that is basically a third fake. Number 2 is Fortune Basmati rice. This Indian import is sold at Costco and through online retailers, and it has some of the worst lab numbers on this entire list. Brace yourself for these stats. Adulteration testing revealed 32.86% non-basmati grains. Let me put that in perspective because this number is wild. Nearly a third of what you are buying is not actually basmati rice. 1 out of every 3 grains in the bag is a lie. You are paying basmati prices for a bag that is 1/3 imposter, and the brand is just hoping you will not notice because who actually inspects their rice grain by grain? The broken and fragmented rice percentage hit 45.7%, the worst of every single brand that was tested. Almost half the bag is broken rice. That is not a premium product by any stretch. That is not even a decent product. I have seen better quality control at gas station sushi counters, but here is what really makes this one dangerous. Lead contamination was measured at 0.3 parts per million, and the safety limit is 0.2 parts per million. That means it is over the line, and when you stack lead on top of arsenic, which came in around 70 parts per billion based on similar Indian basmati results from the Healthy Babies Bright Futures testing, the combined toxic load on your body goes up in a serious way. Your liver and kidneys are already working overtime just dealing with everyday life in America. Adding lead and arsenic on top of that from something as basic as rice is asking your organs to run a marathon when they are already exhausted. Lead builds up in your body over time and does not leave easily. In children, it causes developmental delays and learning difficulties. In adults, it raises blood pressure and damages organs, including the kidneys and brain. This is not some theoretical risk from a lab report nobody reads. This is a real thing happening in real kitchens across the country every single night. Parents are cooking this for their kids thinking they are making a healthy meal and they have no idea what is actually in the bag. That is what makes this one so frustrating. US consumers have reported mushy smells and uneven grain sizes in their bags, which lines up perfectly with the test results showing poor quality control across the board. The price sits around $15 to $20 for a 20-pound bag, which seems like a steal until you look at what is actually in there. If you have kids in the house, get this one out of your pantry today. Not tomorrow. Today, the worst of the worst. And the number 1 brand to avoid is Kohinoor Basmati rice. This imported Indian brand is everywhere. Walmart, Amazon, ethnic grocery stores all across the country carry it, and it has the single worst adulteration rate of any brand that was put through testing. A 2017 comparative test by Consumer Voice in India found that Kohinoor contained 36.6% non-basmati rice. I want you to really sit with that number. Over a third of the product is not what the label says. You could grab a handful of rice out of that bag, and statistically more than 1 in 3 of those grains has no business being there. It failed Agmark purity standards, which are India's own quality certification benchmarks for agricultural products. So, even by the standards of the country where it is produced, this rice is failing. That is like getting rejected from a club you helped build. You are handing over premium basmati money and getting more than a third of something else mixed in. The broken grain rate was 22.15% on top of that, which adds to the overall quality disaster. Pesticide traces of tricyclazole, a fungicide that has been linked to liver damage in studies, were detected during testing. While the levels fell within technically allowable limits, the fact that it showed up at all in a product with this many other red flags is concerning. It is like finding one cockroach in a restaurant. Sure, technically one cockroach does not shut the place down, but you are never eating there again. Arsenic levels for the brown basmati version came in around 80 to 100 parts per billion, which is average for Indian rice, but still contributes to the total concern when combined with the adulteration and the pesticide findings. Indian rice farming regulations are generally less strict than US and EU standards, and that reality shows up clearly in these test results. Consumer complaints on major retail sites describe a plastic-like texture in certain batches, which could indicate over-processing or manufacturing problems. Some reviewers say the cooked rice feels almost rubbery, nothing like the soft, fluffy, aromatic experience real basmati is supposed to give you. And if you are wondering how that compares to safer options, California. Grown hybrids tend to be a much better pick for arsenic levels, while Indian and Pakistani origin. Rice with a proper GI tag at least guarantees you are getting authentic basmati, even if arsenic levels are moderate. Kohinoor gives you neither safety nor authenticity. It fails on every single metric that matters. Between the fake grains, the pesticide traces, the broken rice, and the consumer complaints about texture, Kohinoor earns the #1 spot on this list for good reason. Walk right past it next time you are in the store. What you should buy instead. So after all of that, you are probably wondering if there is any basmati rice you can actually trust. The good news is yes, there are options that passed testing with flying colors, and they are not hard to find. Testing points to a few solid options that performed well. Trader Joe's organic Indian basmati came in at 40 to 45 parts per billion for arsenic and tested pure for grain authenticity with no adulteration detected. That is clean rice at a fair price, and you can grab it on your next grocery run. Lundberg organic California brown basmati showed around 80 parts per billion for arsenic and uses sustainable farming practices that reduce environmental contamination. It is a bit higher on arsenic because it is California grown, but the farming practices make a real difference compared to other US rice. Royal Authentic Basmati also scored low in the Healthy Babies Bright Futures report and is widely available at most grocery stores. When you are shopping, look for the geographical indication tag confirming Indian or Pakistani origin, organic certification to cut down on pesticide exposure, and uniform long grains between 7 and 9 millimeters, uncooked that should double in size when cooked. Broken pieces in the bag should be under 5% of the total. Hold the bag up to the light and actually look before you buy. It takes 5 seconds and saves you from everything we just talked about. The cooking hack that cuts arsenic in half. You can also reduce arsenic exposure at home through how you cook. Rinse your rice thoroughly before cooking, which cuts arsenic levels by 10 to 28% according to research. Cook in a 6-to-1 water to rice ratio and drain the excess water afterward, which can reduce arsenic by 40 to 60%. That is a massive difference just from changing your cooking method. Most people use a 2-to-1 ratio because that is what the bag says, but the bag is not trying to protect you from arsenic. It is trying to make cooking convenient. Swap the method and you cut your risk in half without giving up rice at all. Try to limit rice to 2 or 3 servings per week and rotate in other grains like quinoa, barley, or oats, which carry roughly 3 times less heavy metal contamination than rice does. Your body gets a break, your meals get more variety, and you are not loading up on the same contaminants meal after meal. Think of it like rotating your tires. You do not drive on the same 2 forever, or they wear out. Your body works the same way when it comes to processing the stuff hiding in your food. That is the full rundown of all 7 brands you really need to watch out for. A few smart swaps and better cooking habits can seriously cut your exposure to heavy metals, lead, and pesticides without giving up rice altogether. Send this to someone who cooks rice regularly at home because they need to hear it too.